Out and we're back underway. Into the 1 and 2 corners they go. Chip Petrie out in front. Davey Wirt slides into the number 2 spot. Then it's Alan Chance, Don Gross, and Dave Ledford, followed by Peltz, Stotts, Cowan, and Hirschberger as the cars enter corner number 4, coming in for lap 1.
Hello, my name is Charlie Swartz, and today we're going to talk about setting a race car up for dirt. And we're going to use the race car that we manufacture here in Ashland, Kentucky, and we're going to try to show you all about this car the best we can. And we'd also like to introduce you to the new Longacre computer scales. This is the pad the car sits on. This is the control box that tells you all 4 individual wheels, weights, all 4 wheels together, and all your percentages. Okay, now we're going to weigh the car, but before we weigh it, we need to do a few things. You need to make sure the fuel is full, the water's full, the oil's full, and everything that goes on the race car for racing conditions is on it. In other words, it needs to be race ready before it really goes on the scales. And we need to do one other thing. That's to put a known weight on the scales and calibrate the scales in. Okay, they're calibrated. And now I'm going to put the scales under the car, under the wheels, and we'll let the car down. Okay, now we'll let the car down on the scales. Okay, now we have the car on the scales, and the first thing you need to do after it's on the scales is disconnect your sway bar. And if it's a car that doesn't have coilover springs on it, you need to unhook your shocks and go around to all 4 corners and bounce them, get the car settled into where it needs to come to. Especially on coilovers, you need to really bounce it real good with coilovers. And this particular car, the ride heights, the way you bring the ride heights to this car is with this piece of square tubing. You lay it on the control arm, and this car sets on 18 degrees. So you take this protractor and sit on there, and you adjust the car until it comes to 18 degrees. Then the car is setting on the ride height. Okay, we're under the rear of the car now, and there's 2 things you need to do before you check the ride height of the car. You need to square the rear end from side to side and front to back, and you can get those specifications from your chassis manufacturer. This one happens to already be set. So what we need to do now is we have a protractor, and on this car, if you put this protractor on the trailing rod underneath the trailing rod on the left rear, and if it reads 0, the ride height on this car is set, and this one is 0. And then you go to the right side and you put the trailing rod or the protractor on top of the trailing rod, and if it reads 0, then it's set, and this one does read 0. Okay, now we've had the car on the scales, and before we actually weighed the car, we made sure that we had 1 inch of stagger in the front and 5 inches in the rear, and that's what we plan on racing the car at. And we checked the air pressure in the tires, and we had 12 pounds in the right front. We had 10 pounds in the right rear, we had 6 pounds in the left rear, and we had 10 pounds in the left front. That's what we want to race the car at. So it's very important to keep those tire pressures at what you're going to race at. So now we go to the scales. The car weighed 1,970 pounds, and the left front came out at 463, the left rear came out at 542, the right front was 443, and the right rear was 522. Okay, it had 54% rear and 51% left side. The way you come up with this left side percentage, you add this and this, the 2 left wheels together, divide it by 1,970 pounds, and that gives you 51%. The rear, you add the left rear and the right rear together, and you divide it by 1,970 pounds, and that gives you 54%. So that's the way this car came out right then. But the race we're going to says you have to weigh 2,400 pounds. So you're going to have to add 430 pounds to this car to get it up to legal. Anytime you check the circumference of a tire, you should have the tire on operating air pressure. So now we'll lay the tire down and show you how to check that. And you should use a small tape measure, and you just go around the center of the tire, wrap the tape around it, come around, and this is an 89-inch tire. Now we're going to show you how to measure the offset of a wheel. And you take the front side and put the front side of the wheel down to the ground. You take a straight edge and lay it across the wheel. And then you just take a yardstick or a tape measure or whatever, and you set it right against the flange of the wheel and against the straight edge, and that's a 5-inch offset wheel. Now when you put lead in a car, you need to keep it as low in the race car as you can and as close to the center of the car as you can, which is the pivot point. When the car pivots, that lead needs to be as close to it as you can get, because if it gets out away from it, it causes a leverage and the car wants to swing. Okay, we've added the 430 pounds into the car, and it's came up to 2,400 pounds now without the driver, because that's the way we're weighing this car, is without the driver. And now we have a 576-pound left front and a 648-pound left rear, 552 right front, and a 624 right rear. That comes up to 53% rear and 51% left side. And the way you come up with that now is add these two left sides together, divide it by the 2,400. The way you come up with the 53% is add the two rear wheels together and divide by the 2,400. That'll give you this percentage. What we're really looking for here is 52.2 and 55% rear. And what you're going to have to do is shift the weight to the left and to the rear. At times when you need to move the weight to the left to get your left side percentage, what you really need to do is keep the lead low in the race car, down in this area between the wheels. Okay, now we've shifted the lead around. And what we've done, we moved the lead to the left and to the rear. That's the only way that you can change left side or rear percentage, is moving the weight around. You can't change it by moving the weight bolts. So what we did is we went to the left and we come up with 52.5, which is what we're looking for. And now we have 54.2 in the rear, and that's not quite enough. So we're going to have to bring the lead that we have straight back a little to get to 55%. When you need to move the weight back to get rear percentage, you still need to keep the weight as low as possible and in front of the rear axle if possible. Okay, now we've moved our lead straight back into the car. It's gave us exactly what we're looking for, 52.5 left and 55 rear. The way you come up with this now is you add this together and this together. That's your two left side wheels, come up with 52.5. Now you take your left rear, right rear, add those together, and divide it by 2,400, and that gives you your 55%. Now that we have our 52.5 and 55, which is what we're looking for, we will bolt the lead into the car. Okay, now we've bolted the lead into the car. We have the weights we want as far as left side and rear goes. So now we've checked our left rear and right front together, which is what we call cross weight. It is 50%. The way we figure that is you add these two together, divide them by 2,400, and you come up with 50%. That is not what we're looking for on this car. We're trying to get 48% cross weight. The only way that you can change that now is by loosening up the left rear spring and compressing the right rear spring. We're going to do it in the rear because all the ride heights, we've checked everything, and the car is on ride heights. So if you loosen this up, compress this, until you get 48%, you've got it. To change cross weight, we want to keep the ride heights of the car the same. So what we have to do, we have to adjust both sides of the car the same. Now on the right rear and the left rear, the nut is on the top of the spring. So to take cross weight out, we have to adjust the nut down on the right rear and up the same amount on the left rear. Okay, now we've weighed the car again, and we've come up with our 48% cross weight. The way we got it was we loosened the left rear spring up, we compressed the right rear. That took weight from the left rear to the right rear. It took weight from the right front to the left front. So then we got our 48%. Anytime that you screw any bolt on the car, as far as what changes weight, it will affect all 4 corners. But what we're looking for is 48% cross, so it doesn't matter what it does to the rest of the corners. They're right when you get to 48% cross weight. The only way that we kept our 52.5% left and our 55% rear, the only way that you can change these two is actually moving, lay it around in the car. Once this has been established, the only way you can change the cross weight is to change a weight jacking bolt on the car. That will change your cross weight. If you have a sway bar, the last thing we do before we take the car off the scales is hook the sway bar up to the manufacturer specifications. Okay, now what we have here is the front end specifications for this particular car we're working on. To get the specifications for your own personal car, you need to call your chassis manufacturer. He'll give you all these. And, you know, everything works the same, except they may be just a little different. Okay, what we got here is we have, on the left front of this car, we have 1 degree positive caster. What that means in relationship to the ball joints is the top ball joint is 1 degree back from the bottom ball joint on the left front. And on the right front, we have 3 degrees positive caster. What that means is the top ball joint on the right side is 3 degrees back from the bottom. Okay. What we have on the left front, camber. We have 2 degrees positive camber. What this means is the top of the tire is leaned out away from the engine on the left front. On the right front, we have 2 1/4 degrees negative camber. What that means is the top of the tire is leaned toward the engine on the right front. What you have is this. When you're going around the racetrack and you're sitting in the driver's seat, this is the left front, that tire's leaned that way, and the right front's leaned that way towards the motor. Then we have toe. This particular car sets at 1/8 inch out. What that means is the front of the tires are 1/8 of an inch out in front. And this should take care of your whole front end. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set the caster and the camber. What camber is when the tire is leaned in towards the engine at the top, that's called negative camber. When it's leaned out away from the engine at the top, that's positive camber. When the ball joints, the upper and the bottom ball joint, is the top one is behind the bottom one, that is positive caster. That's when it's leaned like this. And when it's negative caster is when it's leaned forward, the top ball joint. So what we're going to do now is set the caster. This is a caster and camber gauge. You got to read the instructions. There's all kinds of different ones. And this particular one just screws right on the end of the spindle here, and it's very easy to work with this type of race car. I'll screw it on the spindle, and we'll turn the wheel back 20 degrees. Okay, and we set the gauge on the caster side and set the thing right on 0. Okay, now we go 20 degrees the other direction. Okay, and we have 3 degrees positive caster. And we'll straighten the wheel back up. And we have 2 1/4 negative camber. This particular car sets on 3 degrees caster and 2 1/4 degrees camber. What we're going to do now is we're going to set the toe. And what toe is when the front wheels are both perfectly straight, that's called straight toe. The 2 front wheels are run perfectly straight. When it's towed in, the front wheels are towed in at the front like this and out at the rear. And when it's towed out, the front wheels are like this and in at the rear. And this is a toe gauge. This thing comes just a piece of tubing that we made. It goes across the car. This comes up to the center of the tire. And we'll set it with the gauge now. You put that side on the fat part of the tire and this little rod on the fat part of the tire. You get it, you shake it a little bit, make sure you're on the fat part, and you got the front there. Okay. Okay, what we're looking for is about 1/8 of an inch, and that's what we have here. So the toe's set. Okay, now we're going to explain a little bit about bump steer to you. So what we have here is an upper control arm and a lower control arm and a spindle. This is your upper ball joint. This is the pivot point of your upper control arm. This is your lower ball joint, and this is the pivot point of your lower control arm. And what you have to have here is you have to have a tie rod to go with this. So what we got is a tie rod in here with a tie rod tube coming across here. This needs to be in the same plane as this, because what happens is when your car goes into the corner, the body rolls down over the wheel, or you could say the wheel goes up into the fender. So this needs to be on the same plane, because this travels in this arc and this travels in this arc, and that's what controls your bump steer. In other words, if this is on the wrong arc with this, it will tow it in or tow it out. Yes. What we're going to do now is we're going to set the bump steer on the car, and what we're going to do here is we have a little piece of angle iron that's clamped to the brake rotor, and you just clamp it on there and you flip it over here, and you make sure your wheel is totally straight ahead. And you can buy a professionally built gauge for this. It clamps to the wheel, and it's real nice, but it's very expensive. So what we're going to do here is just take this little piece and clamp on there, make sure the wheel's straight. Take this square and set it up against the piece of angle. We put a little mark on the floor here, and we come up here the same distance up this way, and we put this little mark here on the floor. Okay, and now we're going to take the wheel up 1 inch. Okay, that's 1 inch, and we'll take the square now, we'll set it back here, and we'll put a mark here. And we'll go back up same distance again and put a mark here. Okay, what we got here is this car is towed in about 1/8 of an inch. So what we're going to have to do is add a spacer in right here between the spindle and the heim end to put bump steer in the car. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we've finished checking the bump steer. We found that it was a 1/8 inch towed in, and so we're looking for a 1/16 out in 1 inch of travel. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this spacer, it's thicker than the one that's in here, and we're going to put it in, and that should make the car tow out about a 1/16 of an inch in 1 inch of travel. Just take the old air impact. Take that spacer out, set this one between the spindle and the heim end, start it back in, and tighten it up. And what you really should do is after you change this, you really should go back and check it again. Every time you change a spacer to get what you want, you need to check it, make sure you got what you want. Okay, now we went over this, and this is what I am recommending for springs to start off with in one of our race cars. On the left front, I feel you should start off with a 450, a 495, a 200, and a 180. This is left front, left rear, and right rear. On shocks, the left front should have a 76, the right front should have a 76, the left rear should have a 95, and the right rear should have a 95. Now, like I say, this is only a starting point. It could be different on different racetracks. Now, if you go to the racetrack and you have got these springs in and your race car is a pushing, you would go around and check your shock travel, which on my particular car at 3.5 inches of wheel travel, the shock moves 2 inches. So you check and see if the shock is moving 2 inches, and if it is, then that corner of the car is sprung pretty close. So if every corner is real close, you come and you can go to your stagger. If you're pushing, you can stick a little more stagger in the car or decrease it if you're loose. If you're running a sway bar, which we don't run them, but if you do run a sway bar, and you're pushing, you need to decrease the size of the sway bar. On your cross weight, that could be a problem. You know, if you're sprung right, you could have too much cross weight in, so you need to back the cross weight out like we told you earlier how to do that. And if the springs are showing wrong measurements, then you need to change the spring. You go to one particular corner. If it's, say, if the right rear is showing too much travel and the car is pushing, you know, and the right rear is showing too much travel, then that's the spring you need to increase. If the right front is showing not enough travel, then you need to decrease that one to take the push out of the car. It's been a pleasure being with you this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Charlie Swartz able to pull out in front. Malkin and Moore battling for second and third. The flood wall flyer right there in the E1 car. Here they come one more time. 2 more laps to go. Charging Charlie Swartz seems to have got the pace set out as he's about at 6 car lengths ahead of Brad Malkin. Larry Moore now trying to hold off Mike Balzano as we come through corner 3 and 4. White flag in the air. 1 more lap to go. Charging Charlie Swartz out in front. The dogfight goes on for second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Malkin runs second. Balzano now third, followed by Moore, Moran, and Mason. Coming home for the checkered flag, it'll be Charlie Swartz, your winner. Brad Malkin second, Balzano third, Larry Moore fourth.